Tuscan orange grapefruit. My God, America is imploding.
Literally my favorite video on the face of the planet is Michelob Ultra Tuscan Orange Grapefruit. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Fanzone. We are making our way through this tournament, and we are now here for, that was loud, we're now here for another episode. We've got Brian Michaels versus Ryan O'Regan in a pretty hopefully intense match. I'm excited. The last time Brian was here, he talked about leeches attaching themselves to male appendages, and the last time Brian was here, he talked about how normal it is that everyone fucks pies. So, you know, this will be interesting. I'm going to start off by saying, I'm Tim. Hello. Hi. Nice to meet you all. And I'm going to introduce everybody and start with Mr. Doug. Doug, how are you?
I'm good. I forgot I was present for both those matches, and wild comments were made. This is going to be fun. Yeah, let's have fun tonight, guys.
All right. And Robert, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing lovely. I don't have a Michelob Ultra Tuscan Orange Grapefruit, but I do have a Michelob Ultra Pure Gold Organic Light Lager, which has now appeared in my house magically today. It's almost as bad.
I was about to say, I wonder who got that. All right, and our third judge today, Mr. Brooklyn Bill. How are you doing, sir?
Good. I don't have a Michelob Ultra, but I do have water, which is essentially the exact same thing.
That is fucking accurate. So yes, Doug, Robert, and Brooklyn will be the judges today. I am just here in a hosting capacity. But I'm really excited about this match. Like I said, both competitors, we had some fun matches with their last ones. But both of them made it happen. Ryan beating RJ to get here, and Brian taking down Jacob West, I believe. Yes, that's what happened. So those were both pretty close matches. So I'm excited to see what happens here today. Let's get into it right away, starting with Mr. Brian. Brian, how are you doing today? Are you excited for this match?
I am excited. I'm happy to be back. And as I promised you both earlier, I'm going to try for 100% less penis talk this time.
That's fair. That's fair. I designed questions specifically to try to avoid any talk of penis, but that is what it is. Let's bring in his opponent today, Ryan. Ryan, how are you doing? Are you looking forward to playing today?
You had to bring up the pie fucking. God damn it. You know what? Just to counter, Brian, I'm going to try to insert some sort of penis talking throughout this match.
Please don't.
One way or another.
I beg of you, things anywhere. Just don't.
I beg of you to don't do that.
I
okay.
will try, but yes, it is. It's good to be here. It's good to be facing someone again. But it's good to have power again, like a good portion of the Eastern Seaboard. So might as well make all that energy worthwhile. Let's go to it.
All right, absolutely. So, guys, this is the way Fanzone works. If you're new to the show, it's pretty much the way every other debate show works. We're going to give the competitors 1 minute to open an argument, 5-minute free form, and a 1-minute closing on questions that they previously got and submitted answers to. Like I said, 1 minute opening, 5-minute free form, 1-minute closing. The first person to 3 is the winner of the 4 prepped questions. If we end in a tie after those 4 questions, we will go to a bonus speed round style question. We will explain the rules for that if we need to. Something that we started doing on the last episode. I'm going to say it again on this one and then never talk about it again. But the judges are going to, when the debate is over, they are going to write down who they are picking on their board, and they will reveal it then. Therefore, there is no swaying beyond the judges there. So are there any questions from the competitors before we get into question number 1?
I'm good.
No, let's go with it.
Awesome. So let's get into it. The first question is in the category of DC, Worlds of DC. And the question is, what is the most disappointing Superman movie? So Ryan drafted this one. So we'll have him go first. He's got 1 minute. Ryan, I will come in and give you a 10-second warning. When you have 10 seconds left, your time begins when you start talking.
The interesting thing about this question is really going down to what defines most disappointing. I'm not going to make any bones about it. Superman movies are pretty much like a 50-50 shot when you look at all of them as a whole. But for me, most disappointing is pretty much when everything looks like it's going to work, all the right pieces are in place, and then regardless of how much money is put into it, how good everything looks on paper, it still fumbles from the gate. That's why my choice is Superman Returns. It looked to reboot the Superman franchise 20 years after the last movie. It looked to reinvigorate the nostalgia that we loved about the Superman 1 and 2 with Christopher Reeve. It had Bryan Singer, who was hot off of X-Men and X-Men 2, even bring along the writers with him. It had everything going for it, and yet for some ungodly reason, it became just an unbearable slog.
Time. All right. So bring in Brian. Brian, you now have 1 minute to open your argument when you start talking.
All right. Disappointment is defined by contrasting the level of expectations for a given thing versus the value or the enjoyment you actually get. Within the context of a solo Superman film, because Justice League is the clear winner, but we couldn't choose that. No film had a bigger disparity between the two, expectations and reality, than 1983 Superman 3. Coming off the heels of Superman 2, a film that's praised and often talked about as one of the best Superman films, if not one of the best superhero films in general, expectations couldn't have been higher. Up to this point, the series had delivered, and people were looking forward to another great Superman film. But what they got was a bad slapstick-filled Richard Pryor comedy that guest starred Superman. It's a bad movie, not the worst, because that's reserved for 4. But 4 wasn't as big a disappointment, because it was coming off the already drastically lowered expectations thanks to Superman 3. 3 was so disappointing that compared to its predecessor, that when they went to do a soft reboot, that's the point they chose to start with. They kept 1 and 2 and recognized 3 was where it went off the rails, and they had to pretend it never happened to restore the confidence that previously had in the franchise.
Time. All right. So we have Superman Returns versus Superman 3. 5 minutes freeform. Remember, no filibustering, no talking over each other. 5 minutes when one of you starts talking.
Here's the thing with Superman 3. Superman 3 was relatively exactly what they wanted to do with Superman 3. They wanted Richard Pryor on there because he said he wanted to go ahead and be a part of a Superman movie on Johnny Carson. So yeah, they did that. They got the Newman writers, the Newmans, to go ahead and write the slapstick comedy that Richard Donner and his writer, Tom Mankiewicz, went ahead and pretty much redid completely so that this way there was less slapstick in 1 and 2. You can't say that it's a disappointment when it's pretty much what they were scaling for. You could even see it on the posters. Superman holding Richard Pryor looking, ah! I mean, how you expect this to be anything like the first 2 movies? You got what you paid for.
Well, you can say it not disappointing to the filmmakers because that's what they're going for. But we're talking about the audience. The audience was hugely disappointed. You think the audience wanted a Richard Pryor comedy? I mean, this isn't a case of just putting a comedian in a movie and he happens to have some funny lines in there and he's just, taking on the genre film. This is a film where Richard Pryor, for the first half of the film at least, had more screen time than Superman does. And the film takes Superman and straight up turned it into a ridiculous and ridiculously bad comedy. I mean, you had Richard Pryor skiing off a skyscraper, landing on the ground, just looking up and walking away. You had him messing with a computer where the don't walk signal climbs up into the walk signal and they have a fight. What is this, an Abrams Zucker spoof comedy? If you want to say that's the filmmakers were going for, that's fine. But that's definitely not what the audience wanted in a Superman film, and they were hugely disappointed.
The minute the audience saw that there wasn't going to be Gene Hackman on the damn thing, the minute they saw that Richard Donner wasn't attached, the minute that you even saw Richard Pryor on the poster and you heard that it was going to be his movie, you can't really blame the audience if they went ahead and threw their dollars onto the table expecting Richard Pryor and Superman to be interacting. Plus, Superman 3, as far as Superman is concerned, isn't that bad. They may make him a little bit more fun-loving, but there's certainly even just the fight between Superman Good or Clark Kent and Dark Superman based off of the Kryptonite has been touted as one of the best scenes in the series.
Wow, I don't know what you read because I don't know anyone that will tell you that's one of the best scenes in the series. I mean, everything about that movie. I mean, were there scenes here and there that were okay? Was that particular fight scene one of the more tolerable moments in this movie? Yes, it was. But there were so many other bad ones. I mean, Superman in this movie, they have taken the character. People complain about Man of Steel. Superman in this movie, they turned it into a comedy. They turned him into this. He wasn't even evil. He was just a dick. I mean, he's flicking peanuts to break bottles. He's putting up the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Sorry, he's hooking up with this random blonde chick on the Statue of Liberty, who he later just says, "Hey, I don't know you, lady." I mean, this isn't Superman. They've ruined the character.
Well, it's not Superman because it's supposed to be a tarnished Superman. We've seen Superman affected by different types of kryptonite throughout the series ever since that movie. It's not unheard of for him to be going ahead and be changed. And I think this was actually more so than the comics where it all started. So in that case, it actually added a little bit of depth. And you can't say that Superman was boring. The whole movie itself, whether it was the slapstick or just Superman fighting Superman, it was entertaining, even if it wasn't what was expected. However, you talk about Superman Returns, something that was going to go ahead and reboot the entire franchise, that was going to bring us Superman back. And instead, it's a 2.5-hour homage to the first two movies, so much that it copies the first movie. And Superman, you want to talk about Superman not being Superman. Superman is just boring. He's a stalker. He's a deadbeat dad. Him and Lois Lane have none of the chemistry that they would have had from the first two movies. This is a Superman that is almost detached from the heart of what the character is.
Superman Returns is not a bad film. Is it lackluster? Maybe. You know, it's not everything you hoped it would be, but there's nowhere near the same level of disappointment. Superman Returns at least had the foundations of what could have been a good series. There were plans for sequels, but the writer's strike and the change in leadership of WB delayed all that kind of thing. 3 was a bad film coming off of one of the best. Returns was a lackluster film coming off of 2 awful films. So even the tiniest bit of quality would be seen as a gigantic improvement. It was not a disappointment. It was definitely a step up for the Superman series.
Oh, hardly a step up from the Superman series. Unfortunately, you're talking about a Superman that had nothing of what Christopher Reeve brought to the character except maybe his looks. You pretty much had to lean on, what was his face? Kevin Spacey, back when he was good. And you had to lean on him for the star power to actually bring people to the film. There's a lack of chemistry. The pacing is slow. You shouldn't have to have Superman
in my
be
movie,
a bore.
Superman's biggest villain is the supercomputer at the end. And how does he defeat the supercomputer at the end? He carries it in a jar of acid. That's how Superman beats the villain at the end of 3. Is that what people wanted?
At least he actually had a villain. My guy had to go ahead and lift the island up in the sky. That was it.
Time. We were doing so well. Okay, Brian, you get to close your argument first. You have 1 minute to close when you start talking.
All right. We've given our personal opinion, so I'm just going to go to use this time to look at the numbers to see which one of us the movie-going public at large agrees with. Adjusted for inflation to make fair comparison, Superman 3's box office was less than half of 2. Tell me that's not a representative disappointment. They dropped $200 million. Superman Returns, on the other hand, made more than 7 times that of the Superman film before it, 10 times if you count worldwide. Returns also made $100 million more than Superman 3's adjusted take, $200 million more if you count worldwide. This sounds to me like people liked Returns a lot more. They were not as disappointed as you were. You don't like the box office? Look at the ratings. 3 had 26% positive ratings coming off of Superman 2's 87%. That's a 50% drop. Tell me that doesn't represent disappointment. Superman Returns had 75% positive reviews, which by itself is already saying something, but especially when your previous film was Superman 4's 11%, that's a gigantic jump. The cinema score didn't exist back then, but Superman Returns scored a solid B+, showing most people weren't nearly as disappointed as you. Bottom line, people were way more disappointed than 3.
All right. Ryan, you now have 1 minute to close your argument when you start talking.
You want to talk about the numbers? Here's the thing. Superman had a $39 budget, $1 million budget. grossed over 100, so it made more than double its budget. 204 budget for Superman Returns, 391.1 gross. Didn't even make that double. All right, it lost money that it was supposed to have made. It was supposed to be the reboot of the greatest superhero of all time, and instead, Bryan Singer, who should have had all the press in the world going like, okay, we're gonna make the Superman great. He had the writers from X2 where we're gonna make the Superman great. He didn't make Superman great. He went ahead and instead of creating something original, he backtracked on original ideas that we've already seen in other movies, and he pretty much made Superman unlikable. I can understand people being slightly disappointed by number 3, but you can't say it wasn't entertaining. It was entertaining. People love Christopher Reeve's portrayal in that movie. Richard Pryor did what he did. He made it funny. It was not as disappointing as you got with Superman Returns.
Time. All right. Cool beans, as they say. I'm going to bring in those judges who have hopefully written down their choices by now. This is fun for me because I don't have to say anything, and I just get to sit here and enjoy and let them make the decisions. This is the best decision I could have come to. All right, so we'll start with Doug. Doug, who are you voting for and why?
I gave my point to Brian. You fought his battle the entire time.
I'm sorry, I can't.
I'd like to know he actually gave his point to Brain.
I was just about to say that too.
Dude, I'm so used to that. Don't worry about it.
I'm smart.
All right,
S-M-A-R-T.
All right, so Doug giving his point to Brain or Brian, whichever one we want to say today. That's fine. Let's move over to Brooklyn. Brooklyn, where are you going?
So one of the things in debate that I find is often the backbone is assume that your audience knows nothing. One person did this, the other person didn't do it. And that's why I'm going with Brain / Brian.
All right, so that means Brian does get the first point. Robert, where would you have gone?
Yeah, there's a lot here that was a lot of personal opinions about the movies, and obviously, like, one person can say something's entertaining, one person can say it's not. But when there was more evidence brought in to support one opinion versus the other, I also gave it to Brian. I don't usually like just the numbers spitting, but in this instance, when you're talking about overrated and a drop from previous films compared to newer films, I thought that was a really strong argument. So I have to go for Brian as well.
All right. So with that, Brian gets point number 1. So we are going to move on to question numero 2, which is a category that Brian drafted. It is the category of action adventure. And the question is, what is the funnest, most fun, I don't know, I'm bad at speaking, 80s action film? So because Brian drafted this one, he's going to go first. You get 1 minute to start your argument when you start talking.
So the question is, what is the funnest action movie from the 80s? Not the best, but the most fun. Now, this can be interpreted many ways. Fun because of the over-the-top action, fun because of dialogue and characters, fun because it takes you on a roller coaster ride of excitement. It seems to me there's one franchise that did a perfect job of balancing the action and the fun in every aspect of the film, and that is Indiana Jones. All three that came out in the 80s could be strong contenders, but it's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade that perfected that balance and let the fun shine through while not overshadowing the amazing action scenes. Indiana Jones as a character was already fun. His personality, his adventures, his success, even his failures were fun. But throwing the perfectly cast Sean Connery as his father, everything goes to another level. The relationship between these two, the chemistry of the actors, provides for the most fun moments, from the biggest action sequences like the Zeppelin or the escape from Castle Brunwald, down to the moments where they're just having a conversation. The banter between the father and son is amazing. Add to that the return of Sala and Marcus Brody with their own side adventures, and you have a film that is the very epitome of fun from start to finish.
Time. All right. Let's move over to Ryan. You now have 1 minute to open your argument when you start talking.
the question was, what was the funnest 80s action movie? Now, for me, I've got to think about what dictates an 80s action movie. Something that's relatively set in the era, something that speaks to the 80s, something that pretty much has all the earmarks of what you would get in a movie during that era, whether it's the gunplay, it's the surly talk between people, it's the cars, it's the chases, it's the cocaine, it's the women, it's all the opulence that you got in the 80s. You know, the tropes had to start somewhere. And for one movie, for me, that's where a lot of the tropes started. It was Beverly Hills Cop, the vehicle that pretty much made Eddie Murphy, a comedic star, so damn lovable, so damn fun to watch on his own rather than relatively needing a second banana like he got in 48 Hours. He was able to carry this movie along, and his experience in Beverly Hills, it speaks a lot to the era that it came out in. And ultimately, I just really love the character.
Time. All right, we've got Beverly Hills Cop and Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. 5 minutes, gentlemen, when one of you starts talking.
All right, so right from the beginning, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, you know that you are in for a great fun ride. I mean, you've already seen 2 Indiana Jones movies by that point. This one starts out with River Phoenix setting the tone perfectly. The casting of Connery as his father is really equaled by River Phoenix as young Indiana Jones, and his whole adventure sets off the tone great. And from there, it just gets better and better when Connery shows up, and then as the adventure builds, and every single moment you're watching those two have so much fun. Whereas Beverly Hills Cop, I don't feel that kind of fun. It's funny, but I wouldn't call it fun.
See, here's the thing, though. I mean, yes, you got Indiana Jones for like 3 movies within that decade. When there's Eddie Murphy, you only had like 2 of the Beverly Hills Cop movies. But here's the thing. For me, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is a nice adventure movie. It's a fun adventure movie, and I don't see it as an 80s action movie.
Okay,
it's one of those things where no. It's one of those things where it's kind of like, I can understand people looking at the Raiders movie and Temple of Doom and then seeing this, and obviously it's very close in relation to Raiders, so it has a nice little bit of nostalgia to fall back on in regards to, a Catholic plot, Nazis. They wanted to, forget Temple of Doom, go right to that. So yeah, when you're working with something established, it's easy to make something entertaining. You go ahead and you take someone like Eddie Murphy, who is not prone to much of the action genre. You put him into a very realistic environment of a black man from Detroit going to Beverly Hills and being completely culture shocked, trying to maneuver through what is a legitimate action movie plot.
Move on.
Okay, I'm jumping in. Okay, you really don't want to get into the argument of whether something qualifies as an action movie, because the action is action adventure. Yes, there's adventure.
I'm not saying it's not an action movie. It's not an.
Here's the problem.
Action movie.
Yours isn't. Just because cop is in the title does not make something an action movie. It's very 80s, absolutely very 80s. I love the characters like you do. Yes, absolutely. But it is a comedy. Paul Blart Mall Cop has cop in the title. Nobody's going to call that an action film, and that actually has more action than Beverly Hills Cop. Do you know how many action scenes there are in Beverly Hills Cop? I do. I counted 2. There's the truck chase, the world's slowest truck chase in the beginning of the movie, and a 10-minute segment at the end with a shootout. And from those action scenes, none of the fun of the movie comes from the action. They're serious action scenes bookending a comedy. Whereas Indiana Jones, the entire movie, every single scene, whether it's conversation or actually, yes, the action scenes, there is fun in every single grain of his DNA.
First of all, you're wrong, because the strip club definitely had its action.
There was one gunshot. He shot, held him down, and said, "Freeze, you're under arrest." That's not an action scene. Next.
The dinner club had its action scene. Their action does not necessarily mean it has to be high-end, high spectacle. The fact that Eddie Murphy was able to do it with Beverly Hills Cop on a much smaller budget doesn't necessarily denote it as being a non-action movie just because there's no tanks and planes and an egregious amount of set pieces.
I'm not talking egregious. I'm talking enough to qualify it as an action movie. Yours is a person who is a cop, who is walking around investigating this crime, but there's not enough action there to make it an action movie. It is a comedy that has some action scenes and action elements, but it is not an action movie. And even if you want to say, yes, it is an action movie, fine, let's put that aside and say that it is. Indiana Jones overshadows it in every single sense of the word. There is not a scene in Indiana Jones that does not just ooze fun, and that's what this question is about: is the funnest action movie.
Oh, there's a lot of scenes that don't scream fun. The whole thing with him talking to what's his face about the tablet in regards to his father missing. The whole argument between him and Elsa in the hotel room. The whole idea.
There wasn't fun in those scenes.
Him and Elsa.
His argument with Elsa was hilarious.
No. Why does there always have to be a goddamn love interest? You don't need a love interest in a movie. And the fact is that thing perpetrated all the way to the goddamn very end. The only real exciting part about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is the fact that it is an Indiana Jones movie. Some stuff is just part and parcel. You're expecting it. Whereas with Beverly Hills Cop, it was a surprise hit. It was a surprise enjoying hit. To say that it's not an action film is regardless, but to go ahead and say that it's not entertaining, it's not fun, it's not something that a lot of fans can relate to.
I never said it wasn't surprising. I never said it wasn't fun. I never said it wasn't a good movie. I like it. I think it's a hilarious movie. But
it's a great 80s action movie.
It's not part and parcel because, yes, the previous Indiana Jones movies were fun. Yes, I even like 2. A lot of people don't. But Last Crusade added in Sean Connery. And that single element elevated the fun of this trilogy, of the series, to another whole level, because you get to see him and his father interacting both on a familial basis and in the way they handle situations in the action different.
And that's the problem. You lean so much on Sean Connery, you go ahead and you take him out, maybe replace him with Marcus Brody. It's relatively still that kind of movie.
So you're going to lean on Eddie Murphy?
All right. This one got heated, as they say. Ryan, you now have 1 minute to close your argument whenever you start talking.
To finish my thought, if you went ahead and took Sean Connery out of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, it would still be a great movie. But it wouldn't be as much, fun. You pretty much have to lean on Sean Connery. You have to lean on his character, period, for the entirety of the movie for it to be truly entertaining. He has the best jokes. He has the best one-liners. He gives at least some counterpart to Indy. Whereas if you were to go ahead and take any side character out of Beverly Hills Cop, Eddie Murphy's still dominating. Eddie Murphy makes that movie happen. He is what makes it entertaining. He is what makes it fun. His sarcasm, he knows when to switch from the humor to the action. He creates a character that is a lot more relatable to Indiana Jones and thus someone that I'd want to actually watch more of. And to say that it's not an action movie is belligerent because it's pretty much a quintessential 80s action movie. It is probably the top 80s action comedy of that entire decade. So to say that it's not fun, it's not an action movie, is ignorant.
All right, Ryan, you now have 1 minute to close your argument when you start talking.
All right, I get to talk for the whole time. Look, is Beverly Hills Cop a fun movie? Absolutely, but it certainly isn't the most fun movie of the 80s. And more to the point, it can't be the funniest action movie of the 80s because it's not really a true action film. It's a comedy first and foremost that has some action in it. Like I said, very little action in it. You want to talk about taking Sean Connery out of the movie? Well, you take anything out of a funny movie, it's less funny. I mean, why you're talking about taking on an element and it's not as good? Of course it's not. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is an action movie through and through, one of the best action movies, while also being the most fun. The fun isn't separate from the action. It's seamlessly integrated in the action. And it often comes from the action itself in every scene. It's not just, hey, jokes, action scene that has no fun to it, like Beverly Hills Cop is. Sean Connery and Harrison Ford come together here to make this a classic that revels in the fun of both the action itself and in the relationship of the Joneses. An argument could be made that Indiana Jones is the best, most fun movie of all time, but at least the 80s, and definitely if you're only putting it up against a movie that can barely even be considered an action movie, there's no question which one.
All right. To quote me in one of the last Fanzone matches, Oompa Loompa Doopity, holy fuck. That was intense. Okay, I'll do a couple cleanup things here. Both films on IMDb, top genre action. So I thought that was interesting, but I'm going to go to Robert since his vote didn't count last time. We'll go to him first. Robert, where are you leaning?
Yeah, in general, there was way too much arguing of, is this an action movie? Is it not? Is it a comedy? Is it not? Does it count as an 80s movie? There way too much semantics for me. Both answers were accepted. Argue something else. And that was for both of you. So I had to go, I took all of that argument out. the entirety of that kind of argument out, and I thought about, when they were arguing the points about it being fun versus the other one not being fun, and that's where Brian won it in the closing for me when he talked about the integration of the action with the fun and with the comedy, whereas Beverly Hills Cop is a little bit more stunted. It's a little bit choppier as far as the fun versus the comedy versus the action. Talking about Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade was much more integrated. That was a point that really won it over for me.
Okay. So let's move over to Doug. Doug, where are you voting and why?
Just to make sure that I spell these things right so I don't look like an idiot anymore. When it comes down to it, there was a person that actually argued for their film being funny, not characters in it, not actors in it, for the film being funny. And that's why I got to give my point to Fun Adventure to Brian.
All right. So that means Brian does get the second point. Brooklyn, you did not get to cast your vote on this one. Where are you leaning?
When the question is most fun 80s action movie, and you say that your opponent's movie is a fun adventure movie, but not an 80s action film, you're losing me almost right away. So I'm going to go with Brian.
All right. So with that, we do move on to question number 3, which is in the category of, let me look as I lose my mind, sci-fi fantasy. The question is, best non-fandom sci-fi movie of the 2010s. So Ryan drafted this one. So he's what is oh, hey, I get it. Sorry, someone was pointing something at me backstage. So Ryan, you drafted this. You get to go first. Remember, you do need this one to stay in the game. 1 minute whenever you start talking. But of course, I brought myself, left myself in, and took you out because I'm a dumbass. Now you get 1 minute when you start talking.
So the 2010s just came and gone. Obviously, a lot of movies are still fresh in our minds. And sci-fi being one of the more difficult genres to really play around with, I had to think about what was the best that really encompassed what we saw in that decade. So for me, I had to go Christopher Nolan's 2010 classic, or potential future classic, Inception. Pretty much, when you get Christopher Nolan in general, you already know that you're going to get something that's going to, blur your mind a little and yet still be science fiction and science fact rolled into one. It's going to really mess with your mind. It's going to make you think, and it's going to be entertaining. Inception is pretty much all of that and a bag of chips. I mean, when you look at just the nuances from the little pieces that you might have missed throughout the movie, whether it's the ring or the numbers or anything like that, it's certainly a movie that tests your mentality, whether you're a sci-fi fan or not.
Time. All right, Inception. We'll bring in Brian. I did change my shirt during that minute. I was getting hot. Brian, you now get 1 minute to open your argument when you start talking.
All right. The science fiction genre has a long-standing history of not just entertaining, but often acting as social commentary, from Star Trek, The Time Machine, Did the Earth Stood Still, District 9, 1984. It holds a mirror to the present to let us look at ourselves from a fresh perspective, and shows the possibilities of the future, to show the potential of what we can achieve, who we can be, and what we should strive to become. The sci-fi genre is unique, and it offers you a chance to do that. The best sci-fi film of the 2010s does exactly that, and that film is Denis Villeneuve's Arrival, a widely critically acclaimed film based on a multi-award-winning novella called Story of Your Life. It explores a major turning point on a personal level, on a global level, on an intergalactic level. But while it's a tale that involves aliens, it's as much about humans as anything else, more so, actually. It's a film about language, about how it shapes our perception, our reality, and how we interconnect. Look, Inception's a good film, definitely a more fun film. But if you're looking to name the best sci-fi film of the decade, you want something more meaningful. Arrival is certainly that film. It makes you think. It's an attribute that you want in the best true sci-fi film.
Time. All right. So we have Inception versus Arrival. Guys, you have 5 minutes free form when one of you starts talking.
I'll start. Like I said, I'm going to say again, Inception is a good movie. I'm not going to even try and deny that and say that it isn't. It's just not the best. It's gotten a bit overpraised, as a lot of Christopher Nolan movies tend to be, and it's probably a good 30 minutes longer than it needs to be. But the thing is, the sci-fi elements of that, and it's definitely a sci-fi movie. We're not going to get into that. It's a lot of action. It's a lot of bombastic. It's a lot of impressive effects, and there's a place for that. That's great and fun to watch. But if you're going to talk about what is the best sci-fi film of a decade, you're going to want something that also speaks to you on a deeper level, and Arrival does that.
See, I can understand that Arrival goes ahead and speaks on a very intellectual level. It's probably high-end sci-fi for a lot of people that really want something a little heady, a little brainy. But it is just not that interesting, all right? It's essentially Nell with aliens. That's exactly what this movie is. It's pretty much more of a linguistics course that we're going ahead and watching with her talking to the aliens through the screen. And there's nothing really too memorable about the movie, at least as far as a sci-fi movie, a movie that isn't even talking about like movies versus dreams and how we perceive them and how we remember them. It really goes ahead and speaks to the wide audience, those who like sci-fi, those who may not, those who find it very heavy and intellectual. As a fact, the Rotten Tomatoes aggregation called it a smart, innovative, and thrilling film, and it succeeds viscerally and intellectually.
Well, Inception is dazzling and thrilling, yes, but you don't really care about the characters. I mean, in the end, Arrival is a very human story, a very emotional one.
Inception?
You don't. I mean, the only real relationship that you're really getting into is Cobb and Mal, his wife that's gone. The problem is the memories of Mal he's encountering are tainted by the fact that they're continuing on beyond the real memory, and she's an artificial reflection of someone he loved.
Right, because she is the villain. She is the broken part of Cobb's mind that goes ahead and haunts him regardless of his journeys. If he goes ahead and finishes up this one gig, then he can probably be free of her. You know, I mean, to go ahead and have like that kind of mental construct around your brain, that kind of guilt, that kind of remorse, staggering, and be the embodiment of your dead wife who committed suicide because
dead wife. Let's talk about the fact that you're going to have a dead daughter. You know ahead of time your daughter's going to die. Spoiler alert, by the way, if anybody hasn't seen Arrival. She's having these memories, which turns out they are actually flash forward to the future, where she knows she's going to have a daughter. She knows this daughter's going to get sick. She knows this daughter's going to die. And this isn't like a time travel movie where she can change the future. This is what's going to happen. She's just seeing it early. Tell me that doesn't make everything even more tragic. The fact that she knows in advance what's going to happen to his daughter and how it tears apart her marriage. It's she's powerless to stop it.
It's great drama. Amy Adams does fine in it, but as far as being the best sci-fi movie, it really doesn't count because the science fiction within the movie is pretty much lackluster. You know, you're going to compare aliens and their little hovering bean ships, like it was, you know, the Bean in Chicago, to the dream within a dream within a dream, Inception, Reception, the caught of being in limbo, all the visuals that you see, all the little hints, tips, tricks that go on that if you require repeat viewing.
Again, but this isn't action; it's a thriller. But again, we're getting into semantics again about what counts as a sci-fi movie. I'm pretty sure once there's an alien in your movie, it counts as sci-fi. And I guarantee it's going to be listed in IMDb as sci-fi.
But it is. It's the movie. It's behind drama and mystery. So it's pretty much using the backdrop of a sci-fi movie. But even then, it doesn't even lean on the sci-fi aspects. It's just a lot of talking about a lot of language.
It is the best movie that is a sci-fi movie.
Perception of reality, mental strain, PTSD, guilt, architecture, creativity. To have, I mean, even Nolan himself spotted stuff like The Matrix, Dark City, 13th Floor as inspirations for this film.
1 minute.
And they're great visuals. Cool visuals are great.
Movies would be.
But is that a crutch? Couldn't the story have been told just as effectively without all the flash? I mean, that's the thing, is a movie doesn't, like you said, you found this boring or slow, whatever, but a movie also doesn't have to be large and bombastic. I mean, big action movies doesn't make it sci-fi, just like making something, putting drama in it doesn't make it not sci-fi. The fact of the matter is that unlike a lot of sci-fi, Christopher Nolan is spent most of his time trying to confuse the audience. Arrival trusts its audience to understand what's happening, unlike Inception, which is a constant string of exposition where he's just explaining everything to one of the characters and effectively to the audience, because he knows they're going to be able to tell what's going on if they aren't just talking, explaining everything that's going on.
Right, but you need something like that because the science in everything is pretty much hard to comprehend. Whereas the science in your movie is relatively basic. The aliens are sitting there. They talk one language. We talk another. It's pretty much easy to decipher.
Time. All right. So, Brian, you now have 1 minute to close your argument when you start talking.
All right. All right. From the beautiful cinematography, which is just dreamlike and amazing, to the score, to the screenplay, Arrival's a film that's gorgeous to look at. It's rapturous to listen to and breathtaking to just experience. I mean, it is not just a visual feast. It is an emotional feast as well as visually. And it's a sci-fi doing what sci-fi does best. Arrival is sci-fi in the strictest sense. It's pure science without the need to be flashy and bombastic. It's thought-provoking. It challenges our whole concept of time and memories, not just to keep us guessing, but to make a statement about the present and the future of the human race. Whereas Inception revels in the idea of confounding and confusing its audience right down to that ambiguous final shot, Arrival wants you to understand what it's saying. It wants you to see the future and to use that knowledge wisely. Most impressive sci-fi action? Yeah, I'd throw my vote towards Inception. The best overall sci-fi movie of the 2010s? I think you need something more. I think you need a film that can impress but also has something to say. And that film is Arrival. And let me just say, Denis Villeneuve got nominated for director. Nolan didn't even get that.
Time. All right. We will now move over to Ryan for your closing. 1 minute when you start talking.
Arrival was nominated for 8 Oscars. Won what? Any of them? Inception was nominated for 8 Oscars. Won 4 of them. For sound, for visuals, for special effects. It was a movie that entertained both on an intellectual level and entertained the masses in regards to whatever little bit of action there was going on between the actual talking, between the actual science. It pretty much gave people the idea of, is this real? Is this not? It's certainly a more memorable movie than Arrival was. It's been touted around on multiple things. Rick and Morty used it on an episode. Simpsons used it on an episode. South Park did a whole called Inception. And mind you, that 2 hours and 28-minute mark, that's the same length as Edith Piaf's song. You know, that's how long it was. That plays throughout the whole thing, where the boom comes from. There's so many intricate nuances that it's entertaining for those who really want to go a deep dive into the movie, and for those that don't. It's perfect sci-fi.
Time. All right. Let's bring in Dem judges. We are going to start with Brooklyn on this one since he did not get to cast his vote last time. Brooklyn, where are you going?
One of my biggest pet peeves as a judge is whenever you just spitfire facts and there isn't like substance to it. The example that I give all the time is it's very easy for me to say that Cody smells a lot, but until I tell you that Cody hasn't had a shower in a week, then you don't believe me that Cody actually smells. So for that summarization, I am going with Brian.
Okay. So first vote goes to Brian. Who hasn't been the deciding yet? Doug, right? Hasn't been the deciding. Okay, so we'll go to Robert then next.
Okay. There's still too much semantic arguments about is it sci-fi, is it not sci-fi, does it count, does it not count? Both were accepted.
I tried to stop it.
I know, no, but it was better than the last one. As far as arguing which movie is just the better sci-fi movie, I think both of you did a good job supporting your own, or I think you both did a decent job attacking the other person's film. What it came down to for me in this one is who supported their own argument a little bit better. For this one, I thought the digestibility and the accessibility of the more pure sci-fi inspirations, I thought the argument was a little bit better on Brian's side, so I'm going to have to say Brian. I think both are great movies, both are great sci-fi movies, but I think Brian made the argument just a little bit better for Arrival.
All right, so that means your winner by way of knockout, Brian Michaels. Doug, your vote did not count, but where would you have gone?
I would also went with Brian. The argument was just when you break it down, I'm in the same boat as Robert, same boat as Brooklyn. When we warn you as judges to not argue something, maybe just take it into. Oh.
No, you're good. I dropped. I dropped.
Okay. I was like, did I say something? Just when we say something to judges, we're not trying to hurt your argument. We're trying to help you just focal, all your energy on the actual question. And it was going back to the semantics. It was then you have to then decipher through all the arguments to the actual question. So I think Brian argued the question better.
All right. So with that, like I said, Brian is the winner, but we'll actually talk to Ryan first. Ryan, unfortunately, the match did not go your way today. How are you feeling post-match?
Not great. I mean, I'll be honest about it. I mean, friggin' 3-0 shutout is never fun, especially when, despite any adversities I may have had this week, I still went ahead. I still went and did my research. I answered the questions as I read them. And apparently there's, to take a line from a rival, there's miscommunication, I guess. But, I can't knock anything that I said or anything that I did because I felt that I argued the question as I read it to the best of my ability. And apparently none of the judges saw anything that I had going. So that's perfectly fine. Credit to Brian. I mean, he was no slouch. He brought the fight, and that's what you're supposed to do in something like this. But, I mean, the fact that I couldn't even get an inch really makes me just – I don't want to say salty, but it certainly makes me question not necessarily methodology, but maybe I need to approach, Warzone or Fanzone, I should say, maybe with a different paintbrush than what I've done with other matches in other leagues. Learning experience, to be sure. And, more power to Brian. Hopefully the next match is a little bit harder for him. And, maybe it's not a shutout. And I guess drawing board, here I come.
Yeah. So this does mean that you're out of the tournament. But what it does mean is that we will more than likely be seeing you back next season when we start up again for our big tournament next season. So when you do come back next season with whatever new thing you're planning on trying out, is there anyone you want to face? Do you want another shot at Brian, or is there someone else that you want to take a shot at?
I'd absolutely want another shot at Brian. I don't want to say I want to knock him down a peg, but it would be nice to have at least gotten one judge on one question on my side. So I want to aim for that at least. As far as any competitors that may or may not be in the league still, I don't know if Andrew Barr is a part of it, but I actually do have a little bit of an old gripe with him back in another league. So I would like a rematch on that because I don't know when I'll get the rematch over elsewhere.
All right. Well, Barr is around. He actually just lost to Brian's next opponent, so he is around. If the seedings match up next season in the tournament, we could definitely see it. So that is something that could definitely happen. But Ryan, I'm sorry it didn't go your way today, but I still think that you gave it your all, and it's good to see you give it your all. So we were happy to have you here today, and we will see you very soon next season in the tournament. So with that, let's move over to Mr. Brian. Brian, 3 questions, a knockout. Your last match ended in knockout. It was 3-1, but this time you did it the old-fashioned way. 3 questions in, and then got the KO. How are you feeling?
Surprised. I mean, I thought. I mean, I put a lot of work into prepping for this, and I thought that I would probably pull out the win. I was hoping for a knockout. I did not think I'd go 3 questions straight and sweep all the judges for each question. So I'm quite surprised by that. There's a couple of them I wasn't sure which way the judges would go. To be honest with you, on at least 2 of the questions we got to, and the one we didn't get to, his choice was probably my second choice. So it was a matter of you just had to find a way to argue against his, even though you kind of agree with it to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. So I alluded to this with Ryan, but your next opponent is in a number 1 contenders match, Nicholas TWOHIG. So you are going up against TWOHIG. He just beat Barr in order to get to that number 1 contenders. You're going up against him now. How are you feeling about that?
That's a little intimidating. I mean, Nick's a great guy, and he knows his stuff, and he knows how to talk. Especially on the fandom side, he's going to have a lot more knowledge to build off of his arguments with that. So am I optimistic about my chances there? Not necessarily, but I wouldn't count me out. I think I'll put up a fight.
Oh, I'm not counting you out at all. I think that is going to be an epic match. Both you have 2 more KOs than he. No, you have 1 more KO than he does, I believe. So that'll. You've been playing very, very well. He's been playing well. I think it's going to be a great match. And just don't forget, Brian, he beat Jim Green in Warzone, so maybe he knows a little bit about Warzone. Okay, no,
I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying there's me and him in Warzone, and then there's him and me in Fandom. So.
I think it's more like you in Warzone, you him.
No, I've seen him play pretty good over there.
But anyway, so that'll be a great match. That's coming up in 2 weeks. So we will see you back very soon for that match. And winner of that match gets a shot at the champion. I hear he's a disgusting human being. So with that, let's throw it back over to the judges one last time. Doug, final thoughts.
I think Brian fought well. Brian fought the arguments, and that's a key in debate. You got to fight these arguments, not necessarily fight around the argument, in my opinion.
All right, and Brooklyn, what about you?
If you're debating on whether or not the movie qualifies, the judges or Tim first of all would have said no to the answer first of all. Prep. That's how like Brian said it himself. Did a lot of prep for the match, and I think that's ultimately what it came down to for me personally. That is the key to any debate victory, in my opinion.
All right, and Robert, what about you?
Yeah, I do think it was a little bit closer than what the score may seem. I do think Ryan fought the best he could for certain picks. You know, he made some good picks. I just think the arguments were just a little bit off, a little bit more in favor of Brian. So still a good fight, and I'm excited to see Ryan come back next season for sure.
All right. So that's going to do it for us today at Fanzone. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, we're going to be back in 2 weeks with that number 1 contenders match we alluded to. It should be a good one. Brian Michaels versus Nicholas TWOHIG, who will win to go have a shot at a title match. It'll be exciting, but I want to thank the competitors here today, Brian and Ryan, also Doug, Brooklyn, and Robert for jumping in and judging. We will see you guys very soon with another match. Peace out. Drive safely. I'll give it to Brooklyn on this one.
Michelob Ultra Tuscan Orange Grapefruit. My God, America is imploding.